The NAD M10 V2 that you can see there on the rack there is, as we all know, a very tiny, really modern hi-fi music streaming amplifier that I think packs a real punch for its very modest size, and I've been nothing but impressed with it for its overall package, for all that it offers. But it's not perfect, we can't expect that. But we are audiophiles, and that means we are naturally greedy and always want more. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about what I think is the less obvious M10 V2 upgrade. And it is a substantial upgrade, and that is NAD's M23 stereo power amplifier. I have been really impressed, as I mentioned, with the NAD M10 V2. I really liked its, streaming smarts, its look, and the way everything works with it. But sound quality wise, I really enjoyed its very controlled and composed overall sound that can be really quite punchy with the right speakers. And I think amplifier wise and amplifier power wise, if you're using it with some fairly efficient speakers, it will probably be all the amplifier that a lot of audiophiles ever need. But I am not a lot of audiophiles. I don't listen in a very kind of traditional or typical listening room, and I feel like my expectations are always probably grander than maybe the average audiophile. But there'll be lots of you kind of similar to me whose expectations are always probably well above their station. And also there are lots of speakers like the Mission 700 sat there behind me that are not that sensitive or are not that efficient. So amplifier power becomes very important. And my natural demeanour as an audiophile is when I add something to my system that I like and I really enjoy, I can't help but rack my brains and think about ways that either I can maybe improve things still, or maybe just ways that I can kind of maximise the effect of the new components in the system. And there are lots of ways that we can upgrade an all-in-one type of music streaming amplifier. Of course, we could improve the room and the room's acoustics. We could use DSP, such as Dirac Live, that's built into the M10 V2. Nice and easy ways. But there are other ways too, such as maybe the product's isolation, placing it on a nice rack, or maybe thinking about mains quality, or dare I say the sweared word, cables. And I appreciate not every audiophile will see all of those things as upgrades in the same way that I do. But I'm also very, very, very fortunate that in this system, I've got all of those boxes already ticked, and already I've kind of taken all of those areas of the system to pretty big extremes. So they wouldn't be areas for me, or areas that I would look at as upgrade potentials either. So the obvious upgrade to the M10 V2 seems like it would be upgrading to the NAD M33. And yes, I can't argue with that logic, because the M33 offers nearly all of the same features, but more still, such as NAD's flagship Eigentakt amplification, and more of it, more power. It offers a moving magnet phono stage, and the larger fancy casework. So it seems like it is an obvious upgrade here. So long as the audiophile wants to keep things simple, I suppose, wants to keep things all NAD, and wants to keep things all in one. And that is where I think the M23 offers audiophiles something very, very different. And it would be the upgrade path, I think, for the audiophile that wants to look at things differently, that wants to buck the trend of the all-in-one type of approach and actually go the other way. And the audiophile is looking to start to build a full separates system, a separates hi-fi system. And there are distinct benefits to a separates hi-fi system that extend well beyond the sonic performance potential of the system. But of course, the sonic potential benefits, the sound quality is going to be a major motivator. And from my experiences, whenever I have listened to a hi-fi system, it doesn't matter what that hi-fi system is. Whenever I've listened to a hi-fi system that is built up of separates, a separate preamplifier, but I think the biggest one is when it's separate monoblock power amplifiers. That system always seems to have something about it. It always seems to have just this edge. It always seems to have maybe just this bit more control, maybe this bit more composure, maybe just this bit more separation. Sometimes it's hard to define these differences, but when you've listened to as many systems as I have, whenever everything's separated, the system always just seems to have at least a bit of an edge, and then quite often more. And again, speaking from my experiences, I'll always remember this one. I reviewed the Canon Audio AI 1.20, well, an integrated amplifier. I think it was last year, maybe the year before. And it's a very lovely, solid state, pure Class A integrated amplifier. And I really enjoyed its sound, thought it was very nice. However, later in that review, I added a second one. And by adding the second one, the two work together. So you get a completely separated left and right channel preamplifier and then a bridged dual monoblock pure Class A amplifier. So going from a solid state, going from an integrated amplifier with everything in the one box to having literally everything separated for left and right channels, even the preamplifier. So it's twice the cost, it's twice the boxes, and you would expect maybe twice the improvement in sound quality, but I would say it was more like about 8 times worth of sound quality improvement in terms of that one difference. That was absolutely massive. I was so impressed by how much better the sound was with the two amplifiers compared to just the one. So obviously experiences like that stick with me. So again, when I'm thinking about, how do we take a sound system to its maximum, the separates route obviously stands out to me. But another reason the separates route really stands out to me is the flexibility. And by that I mean we have the choice. We can choose the streamer that we want. We can choose the DAC that we want. We can choose the preamplifier that we want. We can choose the power amplifiers that we want, and any number of combinations in between all of those. So that means we have a lot of control. We have, choice and control over our hi-fi systems synergy. Obviously, complexity comes with that as well, but having control, having the ability to maybe change one of the components in the system to change the system sound, maybe changing the DAC or changing the preamplifier, is an obvious distinct advantage that you don't have with an all-in-one solution. With an all-in-one solution, you are stuck with it. That is the performance it's going to give you. Yes, you can tweak, improve it, but really the fundamental sound quality that all-in-one gives you is where you are. Whereas with a separate system, you can change the power amplifiers for more power. You can change the DAC for more resolution or less resolution, or whichever way you want to go. So having that extra level of control and flexibility can be a major factor, a major motivator for an audiophile to have a separate system. But again, let's not forget, that means more boxes, it means more cables, it means more power, it means more clutter, and normally means more cost. I will tell you what prompted me to want to look at the M23. Firstly, it was my own curiosity. I wanted to try and isolate NAD's hybrid digital amplification to see how good it is and how much I liked it personally. And I know it's a measurement audiophile's dream amplifier, but we are not all musically or emotionally engaged in the same way, and technical correctness is not always the way forward in terms of musical enjoyment and engagement. But the biggest motivator for me is with the Mission 700 speakers, or really the 770 speakers that obviously I use all the time. When I'm using the M10 V2, I always have the volume turned up, and I always want to be able to turn the volume up even more than I can. I can hear at about the 72 volume mark, the M10 starts to lose its composure. It starts to run out of puff. But at that point, the music dynamism from the 770s in particular is just starting to really hot up. But I do need to stress, this is now getting to the point of really what I would call audio greed. Yeah, we're getting greedy with the kind of sound and the impact and the dynamics of the system. But let's face it, that is what we have all of this shit for in the first place, right? We have all of this stuff in our home. We have all of these boxes, we have all of this cost and clutter and commitment to the audio system because we want a really arse-kicking sound at home, right? That's what we do it for. So I think being greedy with it, the word greedy seems like a negative. I actually think being greedy with it, wanting more, is what it's all about, right? It's the big motivational factor. And to me, the fact that I'm hitting this point with the M10 V2 is a sign that I need a bigger amplifier with more power. And of course, I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling like this. I'm sure there's audiophiles out there that, have invested in the M10 V2, have used it, really enjoyed it, but maybe they've changed their speakers, maybe they've moved home, maybe they've just changed things around, and they're finding they're hitting what I would call like the kind of ceiling power limit of what the M10 V2 can deliver. And that's not a criticism. Every product has its limit, well, most of them do. do, some probably don't, but most, products, especially one this compact and of this type and style, it's always going to have a power and capability limit. And if we hit the top of that limit, well then fine. It just means we need to, maybe look at, turn the volume down, I suppose, or maybe look at an alternative solution. And on the rear of the M10 V2, you have a set of analog pre-outs. So all you need to do is run some cables to the M23 or any power amplifier for that matter, change where your speaker cables are plugged into, and you get the sound from the new amplifier. You don't need to change any settings or anything like that, so it's a very easy change to make. But this is something really critical to pay attention to. With this particular setup, you would think going from a continuous 100 watts of power in the M10 or with the M10 V2 to a continuous 200 watts of power with the M23, that we would get maybe twice the volume. Or we would maybe have to have the volume on about half where we normally would for the same perceived loudness. That's what you would expect. The NAD M23 is a standalone power amplifier that uses their flagship Eigentakt amplification, and it can deliver a very healthy 200 watts into 8 ohms and 380 watts into 4 ohms. And by all accounts, it measures great in all areas, and it costs £3,399. And I don't think there is much more to say about it at this stage. And on the rear, you have all of the connections you would expect from a power amplifier, with one setting to pay attention to, and that is the gain setting. I had to select that to high, otherwise the volume was too low. And even high doesn't really seem high enough when using the M10 as the preamplifier, but it's okay. And that is the story here. Definitely something to consider, because if you're only going to use the M10 V2 at lower volumes, then I don't think you're really going to notice much difference. But let's face it, that wouldn't be why you'd be upgrading in the first place. It wouldn't be why you're looking to spend the money and add the complexity to the system. Where you really notice the difference is when the volume is up quite a lot, and especially when the volume is above 70, because that is where normally the M10 V2 starts to sound like it's maybe running out of puff, right? It's getting near its maximum 3/4 volume up. It's to be expected. But interestingly, when you're using the M23 as the power amplifier, that's the volume point where the sound really starts to liven up. It really starts to actually come alive. And I'm talking now in reference to when I'm using the Mission 770 speakers. And with the Mission speakers, there is now incredible control and bass dynamics. The bass is awesome, and it's the bit I wanted: the scale, the punch, the authority, the richness and boldness. It all gets so much bigger and better with the M23, and the sound feels more free of the amplifier's power limit at this kind of volume. So there is more composure and control, and everything is bigger and more well defined. And I feel there is more authenticity to the sound of everything too, with better defined inner details and much more capable major dynamics. But there is a but here. I feel like now with the system, it's being maybe limited. And limited might not be the right word, but it's maybe the sound quality maybe is being dictated very much by the M10 V2's quality. So it's built-in music streamer, it's built-in DAC, it's built-in preamplifier. And the reason I say that is because the sound character of the M10 V2 very much remains in place when using the M23. So it just sounds like a bigger, more expansive, bolder, stronger, more powerful version of the same thing. And that could be great for you if you really like the sound of the M10 V2. If that sound synergy with your speakers works really great, you can get much more of the same. But the reason I'm saying that as maybe like a potential shortcoming is because in areas of kind of outright sound resolution, soundstage, three-dimensionality, and a few others, I've heard the Mission 770s perform better in here in my listening room. With much more expensive gear, yes, but I've heard them perform better. So I do feel like at this point, the M10 V2 probably becomes a little bit of the bottleneck of the system, but actually the upgrade going to the M23 is still 100% worth it if you're listening to more demanding speakers or maybe at much louder volumes. And I think it gives you very much a taste of why you might want to go down the separates route in the first place. But it also leads me to think that, yeah, I've still got a lot more testing to do with the M23 because I've got a funny feeling that it will be able to deliver all of the areas that I've just been referring to at a much higher quality than what I'm experiencing at the moment. I don't know, of course, but I want to make sure I've tested the M23 with lots of different setups. Now, it could be that it just sounds best. It sounds nicest or most pleasing or has the best synergy with an all NAD front end. And just as a little insider tip to what's coming, I have here what I think is going to be a pretty special preamplifier made by the company Bespoke Audio. And it's a passive preamplifier with a really clever design, and it's gorgeous to look at. And I've wanted for years to really get to know just how important a preamplifier is to the system's sound. I know it's big, but I want to know just how big is its influence considering it's only really controlling the volume. So this has definitely not been my full review of the NAD M23 power amplifier. I need to test it out much more. But I thought it could be an interesting discussion really to kind of throw this out there as I mentioned, the less obvious upgrade to the M10 V2 for the audiophile that's maybe really enjoyed the all-in-one type solution, but then wants to go bigger, wants to go more open, wants to have more flexibility and control over their hi-fi system to be able to mix and match and change and tweak and mess around and explore. Because let's face it, the all-in-one solution's fantastic. I think with the all-in-one solution, we can really just focus on enjoying music and maybe exploring music. But part of the fun of being an audiophile is exploring the gear and the different combinations and what different gear sounds like. And you can't do any of that with all-in-one solutions. Yeah, they're lovely and simple and neat things that can, be discreet in your home. But if you really want to push an audio system, if you really want to find out what audio systems are capable of and what you can achieve with different combinations, then it has to be separates all the way. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed my take on all of this really. I feel like within the YouTube space, there's a lot of talk about integrateds and all-in-ones and how wonderful they are. But actually, let's not forget the importance and the capability of big separate systems, because they can be separate. It's particularly mind-blowing when you hear good ones. And that's my plan. I've got some really lovely, not all separates, but I've got some lovely bits of gear to review. Obviously, coming in the future will be reviews of the M23, the Bespoke Audio preamplifier, and as I mentioned, lots of other some really interesting ones coming to finish out the year. So if you'd like to see all of these reviews, consider subscribing to the channel, of course. And if you've enjoyed this video, a little bit of a chatty rant in a way, but hopefully you've enjoyed it, maybe taken something out of it, hit that thumbs up button. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.